You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Volvo Trucks has a manufacturing plant in Dublin, Virginia. They manufacture actually all of the Volvo trucks that are sold in North America, which is very cool. That is based, as the kids say. And UAW Local 2069 represents 2,900 workers at this facility. There are about 3,300 workers total there, and UAW Local 2069 represents 2,900 of them. As regular listeners of the show will know, all of the nearly 3,000 UAW members have been on and off strike, mostly on, but some off strike since April the 17th, not long after the UMWA strike here in Alabama began. So it finished last week with an extremely close ratification vote under some, let's say for the moment, we'll get into it more later, but less than good conditions, we'll say. So let's back up just a bit and explain why were they on strike. The first reason was that healthcare costs were risen considerably from the previous contract to $2,000 a year with a $4,000 deductible, which is much higher than they were paying before, and that's no good. That's no good, folks. There were some other reasons, though, that they were on strike, which included the work, And this, for folks in unions, you know what this language means, the two tiers. Under the current contract, under the previous contract is what that means, workers are divided into two tiers. And this information, the next bit of information comes from Labor Notes, a Labor Notes article. They've had some good articles on this strike. So if you're not subscribed to Labor Notes, to their print edition, and you've got the money, you should do that. It's a very good publication they come out with. And it's funny because we were planning on talking to Rhonda Sisk this morning. She's a member of UAW 2069. We were planning on talking to her this morning, but she has had bronchitis, and it flared up quite a bit this morning, so she was unable to jump on the call with us, which is very unfortunate. Wishing her speedy recovery with that. It does not sound fun. Glad it's not COVID, but hopefully she has a speedy recovery there. So I had to do a little bit of digging because I was hoping to get most of it from her. So I did some digging, and it's really amazing how few details that you get in almost any article about a strike, because I wanted to be able to present you with, and I will shortly, I wanted to be able to present you with, okay, why were these workers on strike? Because I think that's important, especially for folks who don't have that's not their kind of mentality. You're not in a union workplace. So like people going on strike in and of itself is a strange thing to a lot of people. And so you want to know why they're on strike. And almost every single article on this strike does not explain at all what these workers' grievances are. It just says, oh, they went on strike, and that's it. And it's amazing. And Labor Notes was basically the only place that really went into detail about it. So, read Labor Notes is what I'm trying to say. But anyway, under the current contract, the one that expired as they went into negotiations that they went into strike over, workers are divided into two tiers. The first tier being core employees, those with more than 15 years of seniority and competitive. New hires start at $16.77 and get $1 more each year for 5 years, up to $21.77, which is far less than the core top pay of $30 an hour. Under the rejected agreement, under the first rejected agreement, which was actually rejected by a percent of 90% to 10% for it, 90% against it, 10% for it. Under the rejected agreement, there are raises, but tiers are there to stay. The division of the workers into multiple groups were there to stay in the in that agreement. So That is very not good. But there are some raises, and the new hires in one assembler classification, for example, would get up to $27 by 2026 instead of $21.77, which does seem like that accounts for inflation and a little bit more. But still, the people who are in the better tier are going to be getting significantly more, which is, you don't want that, because that creates a division in the workplace. And for what reason? For the boss. Additionally, language in the rejected agreement would have allowed union officials to agree to an unspecified alternate work schedule, such as 4 10-hour days, alternate shift operations, or other alternate schedules based on the needs of the business. Time and a half pay over 8 hours in a day would be gone. And these alternative work schedules are popular with management at the big three automakers. And as one can imagine, especially the lack of control that you have over these alternative work schedules is very unpopular with auto workers. It's one thing to say, I want to choose a 4-10 schedule or a 3-12 schedule or swing shifts for maybe additional, time and a half pay or something like that. That's one thing, to give workers an option to do that. But it's a totally different thing for management to have the authority under a contract to say to workers, this is what you're going to do, and, you can kiss my bum, basically. Yet another clause that was unpopular among the rank and filers, and this information from labor notes is also, which this goes into why the strike failed. This was gathered just from rank and filers because the bargaining committee was extremely not transparent in the bargaining process. They were very tight-lipped about their bargaining goals. So this was just gathered from talking to rank and filers on the picket line about why they voted the contract down initially. There was no, the official communication from the union was very, very tight-lipped, which is, it's difficult to rally support, as one can imagine, around a fight in a community and across the country when a union is not being transparent, even with their own members, much less with the broader public. So another clause would have made workers take 40 hours of vacation in order to use FMLA, the Family Medical Leave Act, which is, why should you have to use 40 hours of vacation in order to use your to use your FMLA leave? That doesn't make sense. Also, a worker in the second tier, quote unquote, competitive classification who asked that his name not be given to labor notes for protection of his anonymity, said that he wants a contract like UAW's at Mack Trucks, which is also owned by Volvo in Pennsylvania, which they said is 40 times better. The contract there was won after a strike in fall of 2019, and he wants to see all workers, instead of having two tiers, he wants to see all workers reach top pay after 3 years of work. And this is compared to in the 1970s, before the era of concessions by workers began, new hires reached top pay after 90 days, right? So this kind of puts into context what workers are fighting for. They're fighting for much less than they used to have, while management is making off like bandits. And so those were the things that they were on strike for, and why they rejected the initial agreement by such a large margin. So what happened? On April 17th, they went on strike. Then they rejected the agreement, and they rejected other agreements 2 more times. So in total, they rejected contract agreements 3 times. The membership did. First by a 90-10 margin, again by a 90-10 margin, and then by a 60-40 margin. And finally, on a 4th vote, on the language that was exactly the same as the 3rd vote, workers accepted by 17 votes. It was almost a 50-50 split, just a razor-thin margin of acceptance. And so what did the final contract look like, and what changed in the workers? What made them accept it that they weren't happy with before? Well, the final contract actually, unfortunately, looked a lot like the first one that they rejected. I think there were some nominal increases to wages, maybe some nominal decreases to healthcare costs, but the big issues were still there, which is very unfortunate for their workers and their families and their communities. And one of the biggest issue which auto workers across the country are facing is tiers. Tiers is still there, which is just incredibly unfortunate. And tiers are bad because it divides the workforce. When you've got these two sets of people doing the exact same job, getting paid different things, you're obviously it's gonna be bad for cohesion among the workers, right? If you're looking across the line and somebody's making doing the exact same thing you are, but they're making $10 an hour more, you're gonna be pissed at that person instead of at the boss, which is who you need to be pissed at. And that's by design. And so that's why tiers are bad. So what changed for the workers that made them accept this contract that they overwhelmingly voted against only a couple months ago? Well, we're going to talk about that on the other side of the break and talk about some nuances in the labor movement. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
All workers deserve fair wages, affordable health care, and a retirement plan that enables them to retire with dignity. All workers deserve to have a say about the terms and conditions of their employment, not just the bosses. With the machinist unions...
Lonely dead, stuck, bleeding pig. Lonely did shot, choose to dead.
All power to the workers. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. I'm here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller, and we are talking about the Volvo strike. If you want to get in, the phone number is 1-866-494-9866. Again, that phone number is 1-866-494-9866. So, on the other side of the break, and if you missed it, you can go and find us on YouTube, the Valley Labor Report, and you can go back and watch the full show there. But on the other side of the break, we talked about some of the things that the workers themselves went on strike for, and how, unfortunately, when they accepted it on the fourth vote, the big issues were not that different. There wasn't a whole lot of movement by the company. And so then the question arises, well, what changed to make workers, the same workers who rejected this agreement by 90% to 10%, what made them accept it? Well, you've got three things as I see it. You've got employer intimidation, you've got a lack of support from the union itself, from the international, from the local, and a lack of transparency. So let's talk about the union side, then we're going to talk about the employer side, and then we've got some stuff about where does that leave workers who don't have unions? Where does that leave the workers at Volvo Trucks, specifically moving forward, right? Because we're going to lay out some issues with the union, with their strategy here, and so what does that mean for people? Does that mean that all unions are bad? Does that even mean that this union is fundamentally bad and that workers should turn in their cards? Well, I'll give you a spoiler. The answer is no, but let's talk about that for just a second. On the union side, like I mentioned before, the bargaining was incredibly opaque, even for the UAW. And it's so opaque that they did not even release copies of the contract online, which is their standard operating procedure for negotiations with the big three automakers, with Ford and Chevrolet and GM. That's their standard operating procedure. When they do negotiations with the big three, they release tentative agreements online that all of the members can look at. Well, this time they didn't even do that. They, for some of the votes, they had these huge paper copies, unwieldy paper copies of the agreements that you could come and pick up from the local hall if you wanted. And other times they didn't even let workers look at the whole of the language before they voted on it. And I think that was the case with this last time as well. They only handed out highlight pamphlets, like, okay, what are the highlights of this, without actually seeing the detail, like the real details of the agreement. It's kind of reminiscent of how Congress sometimes votes on things. I think a lot of folks will remember Nancy Pelosi's we've got to vote for it so we can see what's in it, which is just, normal people, right? That's absurd. It's silly. That's a silly way to run our society. It's a silly way to run bargaining for a union, for a workplace. It's silly. It's not good. So it was incredibly opaque, and there was not a lot of support from the local and the international. Every time they came to the workers with an agreement, they were not straight with them. They were like, this is a good agreement. You should vote for it. You should do this and you should do that, and just go back to work. And David, I think last week he said, and sometimes with elected union officials, with people who they are staff on the union, there's some amount of perverse incentives there, right? Like, yeah, and that's just the way it is, and you've got to deal with that, and you've got to set up structures with that. But there is some amount of perverse incentives where union officials want their workers to go back to work because they want to keep the union flowing, as opposed to making sure that the agreement is the best that the workers can get, which is very unfortunate.
And that's something that's been a hallmark of labor really since...
Is your mic on?
Let's see. It should be.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Let me see the OBS.
Okay.
Yeah. So, on the employer side, it doesn't look like your mic's on from looking at the Audacity. Maybe check that out. But on the employer side, what happened? Well, they took advantage of the weak leadership, and they threatened workers with implementation of the contract over their no vote, which would not be good, and a removal of their bonus. So they basically said that, okay, look, if you vote to ratify it on this fourth try, on the fourth vote, then you'll get a $2,000 sign-on bonus, and if you don't, then no matter when it is that we finally wrap it up, you won't get a sign-on bonus, which is really coercive. And so and of course, there's definitely threats from the company in all sorts of ways, and coercion from the company, and the contract that they offered itself was coercive, because it's like you're not giving them what they're worth. And so what does it mean then for, like I said, for workers and for people that aren't in unions? What does that mean? It means that sometimes you do actually have to fight the boss, and you have to fight the union to a certain extent. And in fact, the guest that we were going to talk to, she filed a ULP against her local president, an unfair labor practice against her local union president, for their lack of transparency in bargaining, which in case there's any confusion about where we would stand on that, that's cool as hell, and very cool. If you're elected officers, the officers don't work. They're not supposed to work for the company. They work for you. And so if they're not doing their jobs, screw them, right? File ULPs against them. Fight them. And that's great. And so it just goes into the larger kind of UAW strategy and some business union strategies of cooperation over agitation and organization. And I remember reading an interview, I can't remember where it was, I think maybe it was by Chris Brooks did it, where he talked to somebody who had been in the union for a very long time, and they remember getting jackets or something with the UAW logo right next to the GM logo. And they were like, what the hell is this? You know, we're not on the same team. We're not on the same team. And it's not like he was interviewing like a socialist or a communist or anything. This was just a union person who recognized the fact that they're not on the same team, right? Your boss is not on your team insofar as, you know, your material conditions go, especially if you're in the private sector. You know, I mean, it's not, and so that jacket with a UAW logo and with a GM logo is really kind of indicative of a broader strategy of cooperation over organization, and that's not going to be good for workers. And so sometimes you are going to have to fight the union. But here's the thing. It's better than fighting the boss alone. Rhonda, the person that we were going to be talking to today, she told me in the brief conversation we had yesterday that she has been energized by the strike more than she ever has before, and she is looking forward to keeping in touch, and I'm looking forward to keeping in touch with her, seeing what she does for her sisters and brothers at Volvo. We're going to wrap up our conversation on the Volvo strike on the other side of this break, and we'll be taking your calls, so make sure you stay tuned. This is the Valley Labor Report. This is the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, here with my co-host and fellow agitator, Adam Keller. We've been trying to break down the Volvo strike for you as best we can. So we talked about how, you know, sometimes you are going to have to fight elected officials in your union who have gotten too comfy with the boss, but it's better than fighting the boss without a union. There are going to be some people who criticize unions and they say, instead of, you need to throw away your union card and you need to form a rank and file committee. And, you know, so the question I would have for people like that is, how is it easier to organize rank and file people without a union contract in place to protect workers for organization, even if the protection that the union offers is minimal? In what scenario are you better off without a union? Because what you're doing ostensibly for the workers, which the boss would say it's for the workers too. The boss isn't going to come out and say, they're not going to come out and say, I hate the workers, I want them to die, I want them to be poor, and that's why I'm not giving them the raises that they are asking for and why I'm taking this huge bonus. They're not going to say that. They're going to say something about blah, 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 markets, my labor's worth more, blah, 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 innovation. Nonsense, right? We all recognize that as nonsense, but they want people to throw away their union cards. They want people to decertify their union. They want people to vote no in a union election. And so when it's not just because, like, they wouldn't spend so much money fighting the union. Like, they're not, you know, as kind of wicked and evil and self-interested as corporations can be. They're not stupid, right? If unions helped the bosses, they wouldn't fight them. They wouldn't fight them. And so the fact that bosses are so anti-union should give you some pause as somebody who is ostensibly a worker advocate who advocates against union organization. And Rhonda Sisk, remember, she filed an unfair labor practice against her union president. That's huge, right? That doesn't happen often. And she told me yesterday that there are some people at the Volvo plant that are so pissed off, and rightfully so, at their union that they told her that they're gonna throw away their union card, and they're gonna save the $70 a month or whatever that their dues are. And she said that every time someone says that, she says, no, don't do that. That's one, right? That's what the boss wants, right?
Right,
so
right.
it's not going to help you, and I can hear you now, Adam. That's not going to help you doing what the boss wants. And so what is she doing then, as somebody who's obviously pissed off at her local president, pissed off enough to file an unfair labor practice, which again is not common. That does not happen very often, that you see somebody filing an unfair labor practice against their own union, right? She is, one, retaining her membership, and she says that she's going to be getting more active in her union, and she's going to be more of a thorn in the side of her leadership. And, she said that she's only been there for 3 years, and she doesn't even really necessarily need the work because her husband works, and she wasn't actually planning on staying there full time. But after this strike, it has so energized her, and she was like, she told me that I'm not the type of person you want to make angry. And she said that Volvo and the UAW have made her angry. So she's going to stay, and she's going to fight, and she's going to organize within the union. She's going to fight for more democratic and open and transparent bargaining processes, which we have talked about on the show. We've talked about with people who have done this successfully. You can go back and watch our interview with the NYU Grad Workers Union. They talked about how open bargaining was so important. You can talk to folks at the News Guild. You can read stuff online about how important open bargaining is, and that just means that open bargaining, what does that look like? That means every member who's going to be affected by the contract can actually see negotiations as they happen. Everybody gets input. You take surveys of what the membership wants. The bargaining committee is elected out of the rank and file. The bargaining committee is transparent with what they're asking for from the boss, and the demands are made by the membership on the bargaining committee, and all of these things, and that's going to help strengthen the union and make it better, make it more democratic, and that's going to be better for the workers. And that's so
But that can be scary for folks who are used to doing it a certain way.
Right.
I mean, you and I both know some folks who are good union people who would be hesitant to engage in that kind of strategy. And it's because, for one thing, it's just the institutional atrophy that happens over time. You get used to doing things a certain way. And some of it is fear. Mm-hmm. I know, in my experience on a bargaining team, one of the biggest concerns was how transparent can we be when we know there are people in the union who will run back to management. Right. Unfortunately, you get a group more than one, and the chances go up that you have a snitch in your midst. So those are, it's real concerns that folks have. It's not always, just like leaders kind of stuck in their ways, but there are legitimate issues to work through. And I think that's what your point is, that the more democratic your union and the more rank and file members are engaged in how it operates, that's where your strength comes from. It's from that democratic input. And, I think Rhonda's right on. This is not the time to abandon your membership. This is the time to strengthen your membership and to run for office yourself, to form a caucus within the union. It's the time to rally those folks who are upset about the contract and see what you can do to improve it next time. Don't give in to that boss's wish. Right. To abandon, because they're hoping, number one, they get a contract that favors the company. Yeah. But number two, that if it does favor the company, enough workers will see that and be pissed and, abandon the union, which just means the next contract will be even more in the company's favor. Right. So don't give in to that temptation. I know that it's a real thing. It's certainly hard to avoid those emotions in the midst of a heated loss. It happens. But the thing about unions is there is democratic accountability to working people. So you see these debates a lot of times about, should you operate inside or outside, a political party like the Democrats, for example. But that's a different, there's some similarities. It's a different, it's a different game than operating inside of a union.
Right. Yeah. And that's, It is really important. And that you mentioned there are some there. even potentially, let's say if even this UAW, like, I don't know what's in their hearts. Maybe that's what they think is best for the workers. Like, I don't know, but it's pretty obvious looking from the outside and actually talking to rank and file workers that they don't think that this is what's in their best interest. And so as unions, we need to strengthen our democratic processes and make sure that the members are the ones that ultimately control the thing. And so what Rhonda's going to be doing is she's going to be doing exactly that, getting more active in her union. And one of the things that's happening in the UAW internationally is they're having a one-member, one-vote referendum in the fall, I think it is, which will create direct elections for the international leadership, which is something that the international leadership has been somewhat insulated from member opinion for a very long time, because they've been elected by delegates or by officers or something like that, and instead of a direct election by the membership, which does insulate them to a certain degree. And so she's going to be fighting for the increased democracy in her international union. She's going to be fighting for one member, one vote. And then after that, she's like, I've got 6 years before this contract is over, and you better believe that we're going to be ready next time. And that's just so exciting. And that's the opposite of what the boss wants, and that's the opposite of what some people that are ostensibly for the workers are going to tell you to do as a result of this, which would be to turn in your union card, which is not going to help you. It's not going to help you to turn in your union card. It's not going to help you not to have a union on the job. It simply isn't. And we can go through all the stats that show that union members have it better, right? And not for nothing. They make higher wages. They have better health care. They have better retirement. They work less hours. They, anything that you can think of about work, union members have it better. And so, like, as somebody who is ostensibly in favor of supporting the workers, like, you've got to reckon with that. And a lot of people, they just simply don't. And so wherever you do have to fight against the union and the boss, do it. Fight against the union and the boss. Fight against the union officials, the union bureaucrats, so to speak.
Right.
Where you have to. And another reason that people lean to the lack of democracy and lack of transparency is because sometimes it can just simply be easier. Growing up,
right.
Everybody knows that the right thing to do is not always the easy thing to do, and it's hard to be a good democratic and transparent union.
It's very messy. It can be slower.
Right. There are certain drawbacks to it, but we believe that that's the right way to go, and we believe that that is what is going to increase worker power. So,
yeah, and I think even a lackluster union is better than no union.
Absolutely.
Even a lackluster contract is better than no contract.
Yeah.
And the union is the workers united, not the institutions, and that's where our strength comes from.
Yep. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
All workers deserve fair wages, affordable health care, and a retirement plan that enables them to retire with dignity. All workers deserve to have a say about the terms and conditions of their employment, not just the bosses. With the machinist union's over 600,000 members having our back, Local Lodge 44 in Decatur, Alabama has been serving workers' interests for over 20 years. Our members have the best health insurance in the area with zero deductible plans. We set the bar for pay in the area with over $40 an hour rates, consistently averaging the highest non-college degree jobs in North Alabama with some of the best retirement plans in the industry. We can do the same for you. Together, we remain united, raising our voices to ensure justice on the job and service in the community. The Machinist Union is a true Southern union founded in Atlanta in 1888. We have been serving members' needs for 132 years. The longevity of our union proves our dedication and loyalty to the working class. The Machinist Union isn't just for machinists. We represent workers in government, healthcare, auto workers, aerospace workers, transportation workers, the defense industry, and woodworking. Our members even build the iconic Harley-Davidson motorcycles. If you're ready to get serious about better benefits and wages, if you want to have a voice in your workplace with over 600,000 members to back you up, call or email us today at 3704 or organize at iamaw44.org.
If you want to see what we are up to throughout the week and get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We are on Facebook at facebook.com/The Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. And if you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, you can search YouTube for The Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we also clip segments and release them throughout the week. We do upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps. So to see if we are on your listening platform of choice, you can go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. We've got a website where you can buy our hats and our stickers. Our hats are almost gone, folks. We've only got 15 left. 15 hats left. If you want to get one of those, make sure you go to our website and get you one. That is thevalleylaborreport.org. They are $35. Shipping is included for a good American union-made hat. And finally, if you appreciate our work and you want to help us stay on the air, then consider throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report.